Well, let's go from a little bit of trash talk about the Royals and now talk rubbish, or rather resource recycling. It's far too hard to run a business in Australia, and if you're in the recyclables industry, it's about to get a whole lot harder. You see, the government is about to impose yet another tax on the industry. My next guest isn't happy about it. I'm joined now by Rick Ralph from the National Waste and Recycling. Let me get this title right: Recycling Industry. So, Rick.
G'day.
From Rick.
Rick from Rick. How are you, Gary?
Good, mate. Good to see you. So the government's not listening to your concerns. What are they doing?
Well, what it is, consultation is now closed. You'll remember back in 2019, we had all the noise about exporting of waste.
Yep.
Well, number one, we never exported waste. They're recyclables.
We're going to look after ourselves.
We're looking after ourselves. We support that. We endorse that. That's totally in agreement to it. Unfortunately, at the beginning of the process, they talked about cost recovery, and we thought about that.
Yep.
Well, up until about 6 weeks, November, we didn't know what that cost recovery model was likely to be to actually provide for the licensing, etc.
Yep.
And then we had dropped on us the consultation document that proposes a export commodities tax of $3.98 per tonne for every tonne of material that we export overseas, plus an administration fee.
So this is
proposal. It's a proposal at this point in time.
Okay, but this is rubbish that something would otherwise go into the rubbish. We're recycling waste, cardboard and other products, packing materials.
We're importing. The language is all wrong. This is about recycling commodities, number one. So what
it's not about rubbish.
It's not about rubbish. It's about recycling commodities.
Yep.
Difference is rubbish is in a red bin. This is the yellow top bin.
Yeah.
So we actually have paper and cardboard, plastics, tyres and glass. And the logic behind becoming more secure nationally, absolutely agree with. Investment, we've invested millions and we're there. We're on the page. We're on the same page. The challenge we have at the moment is we're too good at recovering and we're not good at actually recycling and using that material. So if we don't use it within Australia, we actually have to export it. Now, we've exported some of these commodities for over 100 years without any government intervention. Paper and cardboard. We have a surplus of 1.2 million tonnes that has to go somewhere. Otherwise, it goes to landfill. What we're saying, the government now saying, well, if you export that material proposal after the 1st of July, we're going to hit you with a cost recovery model for our administration charges to oversee the system. Now, it's quite incongruous, actually, because the same department prior to Christmas announced hundreds of millions of dollars in handouts to stop on the energy and the shock of the energy stuff, coal-fired power stations, etc. 1 week before that announcement, the same department was consulting with myself over this commodities tax, and we're having to defend the recycling industry. It doesn't pass the barbecue test, and it cuts right into the DNA of our industry.
So, put it another way, I understand what you're saying. They're willing to subsidise the people who use coal for, say, coal-fired power stations by giving them some money at a certain price. But they want to tax you guys because you're actually sending commodities off that could be reused somewhere else and recycled.
Well, we actually have a model whereby we're in business to make money. That's a reality.
Outrageous.
I know it is. So we actually we've traded this material. It's a commodity. We actually send it into lawful markets, and ironically, Australia actually brings that material back in paper and cardboard.
Yep.
So there is no conversation happening at the moment. And what we're saying to the government is, look, the back end of the system is taking care of itself. We support and endorse it. You need to change the focus, remove the roadblocks so we can actually get on with business. But more importantly, put a focus on importing of the material, have some structure around the actual remanufacturing of the material, have some accountability through the product stewardship program. It's take your foot off the accelerator with the recycling industry and trying to force it all down at the back of the pipe. You've got to come to the front of the pipe.
Yep.
So and the other element they've done, the government has invested $250 million in recycling monetary fund. Unfortunately, there's still a number of states still haven't got out of the starting blocks with the money and the spend. So we're saying do a full audit on where the money's been spent and what does our roadmap look like? Where is the shortfalls? Where are the commodities and the opportunities for us to do it? But for goodness sake, don't introduce a tax on the recycling industry for lawfully exporting material. Otherwise, it's going to go to landfill. That's the reality.
It's going to go to all the consumers too.
Well, it'll be passed on. A tax on the recycling industry will be a tax on the community.
So lots of stuff comes in boxes from overseas. Tyres come in from overseas. Yep. There's no plan about what's going to actually happen to that whole of life aspect unless you guys are handling it.
Correct.
And government's now taxing your efforts to do something.
They're proposing to charge us the right to export material to recover their administration costs.
There's so much innovation in this sector, though. There's so many amazing things that
We have
people are doing.
invested millions, Gary. We have invested. We've got smart happening stuff in tyres, really good stuff happening in plastics. We're doing stuff, paper's probably lagging, but again, it's the economies of scale. But all we're saying to the process, we're on the same page. The recycling industry is the solution. It is not the problem. No. You do not start taxing. If they're going to tax recycling and Jim Chalmers starts talking about budget repair, what else is on the horizon for the next 2020?
Yeah, well, I think one of the criticisms of this government is that really none of the ministers have had any experience in business. Is this because they don't actually understand, I'll just tax will fix it, no understanding of the consequences of tax?
I won't get into the academics of our ministers, but what I will say is the fact that the industry wants to work with government. But what we must do is we must actually have a pathway where the recycling industry can operate and can function. We don't need end-of-pipe regulation. What we need is a front-end model that actually endorses it. Hopefully the government will listen to us and say, OK, we understand where you're at, but the cost recovery model, the way it's proposed at the moment, is not going to work because Australians will pay for it. We will have to pass that through to the keeper.
It's OK. There's a recycling tax coming unless the government blinks and has a listen and has a talk with you.
We don't know where it's at. Consultation is now closed, but we're hopeful that common sense will prevail and we'll start now putting more focus at the front end, not at the back end.
All right, well, you're not shrinking away. I got it. All right, thanks, Rick Ralph. Thanks so much for your time. Nice to see you. Cheers.
Thanks, Gary. Cheers, mate.
Rick Ralph.